Welcome audience. Uh, I welcome you to my next video about the Spring Boot Scrap application. So here in the last video we have seen that how we can create a Spring Boot application from scratch, and where we have created one demo application.java file where we have simple uh, demo application class and one main method, and we are calling Spring application method. We are passing the argument demo application class and args, whatever the command line argument we will pass here. And you can see one more thing, that we are using the Spring Boot application annotation here, and one more file is created by default, which is application.properties, which is by default. This is actually, I was doing some work, by default empty. Now, in today's video, we will see more about how we can run this particular application and what more we can do in this demo app. So, first of all, I want to introduce about how we can create a sample HTML page in our application, so that we can see the UI when we're in this run this application on Spring Boot. So for that, actually I will create here one file in the static folder, and my file name is index.html. I'll finish it. I'm not doing much here, I'm just welcome audience. I saved it. Now we are going to run, and then further we will see what more configuration is provided by Spring Boot application, which we have taken as a parent project, we have seen in the last video. And first of all, we will run this. So we click on the right click on the project, run as Spring Boot. So I just want to take your focus here, that what is exactly happening when we are running this particular application, and what all logs actually printed. So you can see here my application has started with some PID, with some classes, and it's saying no active profile set. We will talk about the profiles later on. By default, it's actually taking the default profile. Now it is taking the DevTools property default active. So DevTools I will talk about later in this video. And additional web related loggings is settings to log level web, and the property is set to debug. Let me maximize this. Now my Tomcat server, embedded Tomcat server, which is provided by the Spring. So Tomcat is initialized with default port 8080. We will see that way from where this 8080 comes, but for now just assume that my application will run on 8080. And now it's starting the service, initializing the embedded web application context, and setting the root web application context. Initialize completed the time which is take for initialization. Now it also initializing my executor service. I hope you are aware with the executor service provided by Java. If not, when we will talk about this also later. And adding the welcome page, which is my static folder is scan folder, and it's adding the welcome page index.html. Live load server is running on this one, port 35729. Tomcat started on 8080, and my application started. Now when I hit, so I have not given any IP here or any host name through which my application will run. So my application will run by default on my local port. So I will just provide localhost colon my port 8080. I'll enter, and you'll see See here, my HTML page is loaded by default. Welcome audience. Even I have not given any specific path to here. Why this happens? So I think you are aware that index.html, index.jsp, index. So anything with any extension you are using with the index HTML page, then it will be loaded by default for your application. So this is considered by the application server or the, in our case, is the Tomcat server. So this is how we actually run this particular Spring Boot application, and we have not done anything much here to run this particular page. Now, oh, so come back to our technical part a little bit. So we will see first of all what is the use of application.properties. So whatever the project configuration you are going to do for your application, normally we do these all the configuration related to app, related to server configuration, related to any plugins you are using or dependency you are using in your application. All these configuration you will do in the application.properties. So like if I give you very basic example you have seen on other website too, or in the Spring Boot demo you have seen in anywhere else, server dot port. So what is the use of the server dot port? It will define on what port my application should run. So my application is running on by default on 8080. Okay. Now if I save it, so just say one thing here, what is happening? My application is actually automatically restarted when I save my application.properties. This will not be done by default. It is done just because of I added a dependency as a dev tools. So dev tools is actually used to redeploy the application whenever we do any configuration changes, any Java classes changes you do in your application. Whenever you do these things, and the application will restart automatically and take the effect whatever code change you have done or the app configuration you have done. So now you have see again that my application, why I have used the dev tool so that I can show the comparison what the previously state is there and now what is the current state. So you will see that I have just changed one configuration, Tomcat server port from 80 to 8081. So you can see in the previously installed application on my server port was just 8080. Now in the updated application, once we redeployed it, so it's using the 8081. So if I re hit this particular URL, it will not work. See, site cannot be reached. Now if I hit the port 8081, immediately it will reload my page and it will show you welcome audience page. So this is the use of application.properties. So whatever the configuration we do here, uh, it will configure for your project. Now question comes into mind like why application.properties only? Why we cannot use any other properties file, any other configuration which we want to use in our case? So Spring Boot give you the flexibility so that you can use any configuration file to load your configuration, but by default is application.properties. So where we can see these things that where exactly the application properties is residing, how actually it find the path for this, which is in my case by default source main resources application.properties. So if I come to my pom.xml, which we have seen created initially, let me maximize this. So you can see that we have one parent project here, group IDs. So we have seen all these things in my last video. So this is one more dependency I have added, uh, Spring Boot Dev Tools, so that my whatever the code change I do, immediately it will redeploy the application. So I can demo you uh, easily. I can show you the changes. Okay, I don't want to rerun the server and it will take time. So this is one thing. So if you see here on the bottom, we have different tabs: overview, dependencies, dependency hierarchy, effective POM. So if you click the effective POM, it will be reloaded once you don't have any error in your projects or the dependent project, so it will load the code. So I have only one project right of now, so it will load easily. So here you can see that it will show the detailed information on all the dependencies you have for this project out of the box, or by all the dependencies used by the parent also. So here we have the ORG Spring Boot parent group ID, Spring Boot starter parent artifact IDs, and the bottom you can see some information about the developer, which is comes from the out of the box. I can see the dependent project, so where we have fetched the information. So different properties files you can see here in the properties tag. We in our original pom.xml, where we have very limited information, we have just defined one property, java.version, but in effective form you can see multiple properties actually mentioned. So here you can see that what the Spring Batch version is used in POM, what is the dependency management plugin, HTTP client version. So what all the versions come with 2.3.1 release Spring Boot application. You can see here in the POM. Okay, and here you can see our custom properties as well, which we mentioned in our project specific pom.xml, right? Uh, so just want to scroll down from here so that I can show you more things. Okay, so one more thing, we have, for example, Timeleaf version. Timeleaf is a template used for the Spring Boot. We can use Marvin compiler version, HSQL version, which is embedded in, so by default version is 2.5, and what all the dependencies. So you can see we have not included any dependency about ActiveMQ, even though it is here, and we have not used any dependency related to multiple dependencies to logging, but it is here. So from where all these dependencies are coming, sorry, this is the exclusion part. This is the exclusion part. We have the logging actually later in the dependency list. With a very large list you have, you can see that the size of this power maximum is quite long. So I just want to highlight that what all the dependencies come. If you want to if you want to analyze those dependencies, you can see here what dependencies in my projects actually having. So before adding any new dependency, just verify that if this particular dependency is already mentioned in your effective form, so and the version. So before adding any new version, just exclude it so that it will not give you any specific error when you build or compile your project. Okay, so this is we have, and very important dependencies. And apart from this, we have the plugins. What are the plugins we have in our effective form? So that we can see here. So I think that it is very large for you, but from the UI perspective, you can see that what all the Marvin dependencies are here. So you can see here the Spring Boot Starter Web 2.3.1 release version, log4j. We have seen the different jar files is actually added, and the most important jar file is Spring Boot auto configure. So this is actually the main jar file which actually this Spring Boot application use to auto configure our base configuration, so that this we can easily configure whatever we want to use. So if you want to use any logging configuration you want to do in the application properties, you can do easily just by defining these properties in the in the application.properties file. Like I have used the server.port. It's very simple on the just writing the few words or the few lines. I can change my port. In previous cases, you have seen that when to change the port, so we have to do some configuration steps. But here, everything is done just by writing one property in the application properties file. So how it is actually loading? So I just want to show you why application.properties is the by default file in the ActiveMQ. If you see, uh, yeah. So if you see, there is one file. If I open, yeah, before that, actually, I just want to show you what is happening in the Spring application, right? So we have annotation, Spring Boot application, and now we are Spring Boot run. So if I open the implementation of this particular file and I have to go a little bit more on this, so it is calling new application and the primary source which I have given the argument and is calling this application. So now you can see what is doing. It is loading the resources from the resource order we passed in our case the demo application dot class. Now it is checking for the null primary sources, web application type, which is taking the default from the class path or whatever the application type we have defined, and it is setting the initializers, application context initializers, and setting the listener, application listener. So this is very, what is application listener? Application listener is the functional interface provided by uh, Spring Boot, so that on application event those listeners can be called. So here is one listener config file application listener. This is the file which actually implement the environment post processor, a smart application listener, and ordered interfaces. Now if you see smart application listener, it's actually extending the application listener. So what is ultimately a type of application listener also. So in this particular configuration listener, which is actually loaded by when we run our demo application, through this run method, it will load all the listener defined out of the box, or I can say provided by the Spring. So it will load those application listeners, and what is having? It is having the default properties. One file, uh, and default search location constant, default name, important part, default name. This is the thing. What is the default name? Application. So if you see where it's actually using, and also some more important point like active profile property, Spring profile dot active. Like you see that we have used a default profile we have seen in the logs, and what is the config name I want to use. Okay, so default very different constant for a different purpose we have, but I want to just for now introduce the application default names where it is actually using. So if I see get search name, okay, so this is config name, this is get search name, one place it is using. Okay, now what is doing? It is get search name, it is calling as the result set. In the result set we are passing it, and with the default name, and it is trying to resolve through the environment, right? So here it will load the application default name and try to resolve it. I open this. Uh, so configuration environment. So resolve placeholder text. So it's trying to resolve the property. If I see any other, this one, oh, sorry, resolving properties. So this is trying to resolve the placeholders. If value is not, so whatever the properties we have uh, for this particular name, so it will resolve all the application files names, and then it will load the collection in the reverse order. So what is the purpose to resolve in the reverse order? The reverse order means when we see that multiple application or the multiple projects have the same application.properties file, then so in the order, the last file or the last application.properties file will be used as a final overridden value. So if I, for example, in my core projects, I have the default value uh, 8080, which is provided by the Spring Boot. Now I want to override it. So what it will do, it will, when it my application will load, it will try to resolve my application.properties file, and it find the properties which is mentioned in the my properties file. It will override whatever the existing before in the hierarchy order. It will override them. So now in our case, our application.properties having the port 8081 now that one. So it will use this only. It will override the all previous one. Okay. So this is the very important file actually, config file application listener, which is actually load when we run our application through Spring application.run method. So this is multiple listener actually provided by if I see the file location, you can see where we have Spring Boot 2.3 release. It is provided here only. Okay. So and one more thing I want to show you what is actually use of this particular uh, auto configure file. So here you can see we have some JSON, some properties file, and some configuration metadata. So if you I open, so I can show you so that Spring auto configure server properties are different name based on the type, what is the method, what is the source type. So this configuration is here for the Spring, and Spring auto configure metadata, one more properties file where all the properties file is mentioned what on the what we can have, right? And additional Spring configuration metadata where we have some default values like mm, take this server dot compression dot mime type. What are the mime types for my server? So these are the default values which provided. Okay, response size 2 KB. If we want to change it, we have to provide our new value into the application dot properties. Okay, so these are some default values actually which is provided. Some level of error codes is provided. This is server port. You can see here what are default value 8080. So we want to change this. So this is the value actually we are changing through application.properties 8081. So these are the different values actually we normally see from where actually it comes. So I hope uh, I tried to explain the application property how actually load where the configuration or in the Spring out of the box provided somewhere in the auto configure jar, and some from the Spring Boot core, as for example we have seen in the uh, config file application listener. So this is the default we can see and we have seen the example of how indexed HTML it's actually loaded and how we can run this particular application. So I hope you like the video, and if you like, then please share your comment, share your feedback, so that I can work more on my upcoming videos. Thank you all. Thank you, audience.